Hello, everyone. This is episode 4 on the Save Canada channel. I'm here with you today, recording on let's see, Remembrance Day, Remembrance Day night, recording to you, and we have a great topic. We have a topic specifically regarding backing Pierre Poilievre and his campaign to become Prime Minister of Parliament. Sorry, I have a little sniffles. Voice might be on a little bit. I've been getting a little bit sick. Never mind that though. We keep going. We need to discuss specifically why we should be supporting Pierre because although he has, admittedly, I'll admit he has flaws, right? There's things wrong with him. We can't support him on everything. We can't support anyone in everything, right? There's some things that like even people like Mark Carney do that are actually good. Surprisingly, he somehow manages to get some good things through. So we need to support Pierre Poilievre, and specifically, lots of the reasons I'd say we need to support him are, which is part of his flaws, is most of the reason we support him is due to the failings of the other side. He has like very little going for him, right? He has all these plans and all these solutions. He has all these proposals he wants to do, but they don't mean that much because he hasn't doesn't have a history of implementing any policy. But let's get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk first. Let's try and highlight why we need to support Pierre Poilievre. First off, is obviously the horrible state of the Canadian economy right now. The Canadian economy right now, we're suffering massive tariffs from Donald Trump. We have Mark Carney is doing very little to actually retaliate against these tariffs. He's been constantly bending over backwards to Trump's demands. He makes very little effort. He always talks great big game about how, oh, we're getting closer and closer. We're getting closer to get into a deal, and they have all of these they were running counter tariff ads or something, anti-tariff ads, like Doug Ford and them were running them, and all they did was create a negative impression, and they ruined, they just helped ruin the deals even more than they were already. Because the deals were already being kind of torn down because Carney is not even negotiating well, first off, but then him and the Canadian government go and they recognize Palestine, while Trump is an active Israel shill, as we all know, and I assume most people know, the active Israel shill, and he goes to support a Palestinian state. How how is this gonna benefit Canadian negotiations at all? You have Israel shill, and then he goes and sees these people who he has leverage against because we're completely reliant. Our economy's been built completely on the U.S., right? We had a trade deficit with them. We were boosted by them majorly. And so our economy is like this. And then Trump starts turning the tables. He's like, you know what? You've been taking advantage of us for too long. We're going to set tariffs on you, okay? And then, oh, what's our response? To go and support the enemy of the people that pay him. Where's the move in this? I feel like, obviously, Palestine, you can't support Hamas and the whole crisis. They're a terrorist organization, but you can't support Israel easier who's conducting an actual genocide. And I've seen the pictures, demolishing the city, destroying the homes of the areas they take over. So you can't really support either side, but Palestine is, I would say, more righteous in their cause. But Mark Carney goes and supports the enemy of Trump's allies, and then he expects that to be some kind of benefit to the negotiations. Honestly, this should have waited, because they have the ceasefire ongoing. Mark Carney likes to take credit for this too. Takes credit for the ceasefire. He's barely had any part in this. He went there to observe it, I believe, and that was pretty much it. Excuse me. He's gone to observe these deals, and that's it. He's done nothing. And then, you go on next. Mark Carney's struggling in the tariffs. What else is he struggling in? Well, just the economy. We have the worst youth unemployment rate in a long time. People are struggling to find jobs. I hear all this talk right now about working like a minimum wage job or whatever. Like, hey, at least you have a job, right? It's so much doom and gloom regarding getting employment. You have all these people who apply to plenty of places. You apply online, you go in person. You can't really go in person anymore. They're always like, complete the online application. Your online application gets reviewed by an AI. Oh shit! Well, hey, you didn't use these few keywords. Hey, your application's automatically denied. You don't even have a chance. And so, where's this leaving the youth? Well, they're unemployed. In the face of tariffs too, which mind you are taking away jobs from our country. This is something I've discussed before. How the tariffs are taking away jobs from our country, and so the youth are left like this, with a lowering rate of employment, and they can't afford things. Do you have, what is it, the industrial carbon tax that affects farming equipment? The price of groceries going up because farmers have to pay more for their farming equipment from the, what was the name of it, the output-based pricing system, the OBPS. That, you take companies or facilities that are carbon heavy and you cap it and you set prices on this to ensure that the cap doesn't exceed. Well, this obviously will impact farmers, right? They're especially considered carbon heavy due to all the cows and everything. So the prices of groceries increase, and youth can't find jobs. No one's able to afford to move out. You have so many people who are still living with their parents because they simply can't afford a house. They can't afford the house. They can't afford the food. They can't afford anything. And then you have this. You have the housing costs going up. You have the price of groceries going up. You have tariffs taking away jobs. Right? The economy is going terrible. All of this under liberal management, and this has been an escalating issue, right, for over the past 10 years, a liberal decade of destruction that's been going on. Over the past 10 years, it's been an ongoing issue with deficits rising, the economy plummeting. So Trudeau was widely unpopular for some of this stuff. Because Chrystia Freeland left Parliament seeing the deficit that Trudeau proposed. And yet, mind you, the deficit that Carney's proposed is even worse than this, yet no one's making a big hoopla out of it, right? You find that strange. And then secondly, too, the Carney government, or specifically the Liberal government, because this has been going on way beyond Carney, but he's part of it. The immigration crisis that's going on right now, and it's an absolute crisis, right? Canadian culture is being completely replaced. You have the infinite immigration people coming in. There's no very little regulation, right? They want to bring millions of people. What do we do? So they say hypothetically, what do we do about the shrinking population? The fact that people are declining birth rates, people aren't having children anymore. Regardless, let's not focus on fixing the issues like house prices, the increase in prices on everything. Let's not focus on this. How about we bring in a million immigrants, and they come over, right? And their birth rates start to match the ones of the white people here. So you're not fixing the issue. All you're doing is destroying the culture, which at this point I'd like to believe the Carney government is fully intentional on doing. They want to destroy the Canadian culture. They want to destroy Canadian culture, real Canadian culture. They want to destroy this. You hear terms like melting pot, like diversity is our strength. Oh, diversity? This is great. Why don't we have more diversity in Canada? No, diversity has never been a positive for a nation. Never. Especially in the first world. You've seen places like, was it Brampton? Completely overrun by immigrants. So you have this infinite immigration that undermines white Canadian culture, real Canadian culture. And then they come in and they take taxpayer money. The resettlement assistance program, they get their phones paid for, they get housing paid for, food paid for. All of this can be up to a year. And mind you, hey, it would make sense if you want to bring people in, you want to set them on your feet, give them money, right? Help them. I personally don't believe in it. I don't think it's a viable solution, but it would make sense at least, right? But then it would also make sense, right, to help the actual people of your country, not these brown immigrants who come into the country. Why would you help them first rather than the people who are actually struggling? The millions, not millions, sorry, hundreds of thousands that go to the food banks. You'd rather help the immigrants who are just coming in that are going to replace them and take their jobs. You'd rather help them first, right? So I don't see this. I don't see this as a positive. Immigration's horrible because you have these people. They come take their taxpayer funds, and then they are not assimilating to our culture, right? You see all these people what was it? There's all these videos I going around. There was one of some person taking some. I think this was something in Britain, so it's not Canadian related, but it's an ongoing issue, right? It happens everywhere. They're fishing and they want to start eating the fish out of the river, the city river or lake, whatever it is that they're fishing out of. And then you have all fecal matter reported in cities, especially places like Brampton, the heavy immigrant cities, and they have no respect. They have no understanding of Canadian culture. I think there's obviously some who come here, they respect it and everything, but there's so many who come here and they feel so entitled. They feel like everything they're owed everything. They're owed everything by the country and the government because they're given everything basically. They have their food paid for, everything. They're brought over here en masse. Their whole family. Hey, all these poop jeets come here, poop in our country, and they shit on us. They shit on our culture, and they want all our shit in return. It's awesome. And so this is an intentional attack on Canadians, I believe. Whether it's intentional on like the lower levels, it's definitely intentional and systemic, right? Because they don't care. They don't care about Canadians as much as they do immigrants. Obviously, like you can obviously, they can obviously say, hey, like we're not doing this because we hate Canadians and we love immigrants. But the actions speak. Like the actions speak. If they really cared about Canadians more, they'd use all this government funding that they put towards immigrants, and instead they would actually support Canadians and the people who are voting for them. But they know that's not going to happen, right? They can import their voters. They can import immigrants to vote for them, and that's what they have been doing for a long time, right? And then you have what was it? Bill was like Bill C. Free recently that wants to set and make it so that all of these immigrants coming in, they're like every generation after first generation, you have immediate citizenship. Like we can't allow this to happen, right? Because they're recently fresh into the country after first generation, still recently fresh. They're not voting Canadian interests still. They're still heavily in like Indian culture, Ukrainian culture, wherever they come from, right? They're still into their own culture. And they're being adopted as citizens to vote on Canadian culture, Canadian issues, and Canadian society. They're not going to represent us, right? But they know they're given citizenship anyway. All these none of these people who are after first generation should have citizenship. They can't represent they can't represent Canadian interests or anything. They're not Canadians, right? And I hate how this is. People are always like, okay, well, they're real Canadians. Anyone can be a Canadian. Canadians are not a race or a culture or anything. Canadians are a people, a nation. This is just false, right? This nation was built on white Christianity, on white people, white Christianity, and by Europeans, not Muslims who come here and bomb up cities, blow themselves up. We can't just stoop to that, right? People are welcome if they benefit the country, but we have to realize like they're not originally from here. They're not Canadians. If they come here, if they come here and they're entrusted to work, and they can assimilate, and they can adopt real Canadian culture, give them time, like give it a couple generations. Hey, maybe they can be citizens, right? They've been here long enough. They've earned it. They've actually built towards the country. But they're here on first generation, second generation, even third. Like you've added very little to Canada, like in the grand scheme of things, right? You're not a real Canadian, and so I hate bills like these. Bill C. Free, and there's even more, right? This ties into like bills like Bill C. 8, Bill C. 9, the things they want to do to the Canadian media, right? They want to control it. They want to control the narrative. They don't want people like me speaking out, right? They see internet personalities, internet Instagram pages on all of us. They see the rise in social media, criticizing the government, advocating for Pierre Poilievre, and they see this and they don't want it to happen. They want it to be banned. They want to control the narrative. They don't want any of this. So you have Bill C. 8. They're letting the ministers just restrict people's internet access. Bill C. 9 to expand hate speech, loose hate speech laws, whatever hate speech is, right? So they can just deem whatever language they want offensive, get rid of it. And then back in the Freedom Convoy, this government, liberal government, they used the Emergency Act, I believe it was, to arrest the protesters. They froze their bank accounts, and then they're seeking unreasonable prison sentence for simply protesting, right? And then they prioritize Canadian media. The censorship is nuts. They prioritize Canadian media. Mind you, it's not the worst thing in the world, not the worst intentions to want to prioritize Canadian media, give it a boost so it has a chance on the world stage, right? But if Canadian media are really so good and so deserving of a world stage, you think it would find it by itself. It doesn't need government funding and government prioritization. Prioritization. Thank you. Can't speak. It doesn't need this kind of stuff if it was really that good and that deserving of it, right? And so you have them prioritizing Canadian media. They fund news stations, the Liberals. They completely fund the news stations. You have so many left-leaning news stations in Canada, and they're also biased against Pierre Poilievre. They love Mark Carney. They love the agenda. They love the immigrants. They love all of it because they're all paid for. And so it's a complete attack on media information. They want to control the narrative. It's literally 1984, guys. Canadian society. We're living in dystopia. It's the worst country in the world. We hate everything. We hate ideas. We hate individuality. We want everyone to be Muslim. We want everyone to be brown. We love. And so, what does this bring me to? Well, I discussed earlier some of Pierre's flaws, right? How he doesn't have a huge track record of actually promoting policy, passing policy himself, right? He hasn't been in any big positions. I've said before, he hasn't been in any big positions, so he hasn't had the chance to achieve much of a title for himself or any reputation in government, right? He hasn't had much of time to do this, but still, he's been in long enough, like 20 years or so as an MP. He hasn't had very big parts in anything, really. I believe I remember reading some part. He had some part to do in some tax act a while ago. I remember that was one of the most major things I read about him. And also, I consider a bigger flaw, although that is certainly a flaw, a bigger flaw. He's an Israel sympathizer. I talked about Donald Trump being an Israel shill. There's nothing to prove that, Pierre is a shill yet. Like, he hasn't taken any power, but he sympathizes with Israel, and Israel is a huge lobbying in America. It's a huge lobbyist in America, and I don't want to see something like that in Canada. We're already lobbied enough by China. Places like China, they interfere for elections. They lobby politicians in elections. The World Economic Forum is deep into our country's agenda. We don't need any more kind of foreign interference. So we don't need like Israel sympathizers in the government. But regardless of this, I think Pierre Poilievre stands the best chance, right? Because level a few here. Ideally, in an ideal world, we support the People's Party of Canada, the purple flag. But they don't get enough votes. They're not enough. They're not big enough in the public eye. I'd love to see them be bigger, but they're not big enough in the public eye. Voting for them might as well be a waste of a vote, right? We all know this. They need to work better to get up bigger in the parliament, and maybe then we'll vote for the PPC. We'll get rid of all the rot in our country, all of the cultural rot. But if we can't have them, then we can at least vote Pierre, because he's the alternative to the liberal decade of destruction that we've been under. He's the alternative to all the liberal media censorship and control of the narrative and all this authoritarian rule you see, especially under Carney's government. I've noticed it's amping up a lot. And he's defending against, hopefully, a liberal attack on real Canadians. I'm hoping, as I've seen some of his statements on immigration, that he would be opposed to all this infant immigration, and I hope that he'd stop it entirely. I'd love to see that. I don't know how accurate that is of a hope, but he's the best alternative we have to all the madness, right? So support the alternative, because it's the only way we're going to be able to stop any of the madness going on right now. Get a man in charge who, I can't have full certainty in because of his lack of action, but he's always better. What he has planned, what he has proposed to us, what he wants to do, is infinitely better than anything that's going on right now. So, we need to support Pierre, and we need to continue speaking out against all the madness. We need to speak out against the authoritarian rule and how the government wants to control the media. We need to get out there, spread the word, do action, make the voices heard, don't remain online because they're going to target online. They're going to target people online, voices online. They already are, right? Because all the news agencies are funded by them. They're already in control of all this. So we need to make it real. We need to be real life, making change.